yeah. Hi, my name is Finneas O'Connell, and these are my film firsts with BAFTA. Ooh, the first film I watched at a young age that I definitely shouldn't have seen at a young age might have been Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I watched that really young. I think to my dad's credit, there might have been some fast-forwarding moments of gore, but I think also as a kid, because they're machines, there's something less upsetting about that, right? You know, there's a gunshot, but then he's just made of metal underneath, so I think it was a little less frightening to me. But man, that movie's incredible. I just rewatched Judgment Day recently, and I was like, wow, I remember all of this from when I was 6 watching Judgment Day. Great film. The nuclear holocaust, yeah, that was that was a nice part of being 6. I think the first film I was obsessed with was probably Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Their performances are brilliant. The writing and directing is brilliant. And I think also shout out to the soundtrack specifically of that movie. There's such unbelievable needle drops in that movie. That movie has that like, oh yeah, that has that song in the end of that movie. There's that beautiful instrumental that's like a Smiths song instrumental while they're at the Art Institute of Chicago that's really spectacular. He sings Twist and Shout at the parade. Yeah, there's so many great musical elements of that movie. It's really, I've never been as brilliant as that. I've never quite mastered whatever that was. Well, I'll tell you what the first movie that inspired me creatively musically was. The Social Network, which remains one of my all-time favorite movies, and which was such a sort of a prestige film. When I watched it, I could tell that everybody involved was of like immense caliber and talent. And it had this electronic score, obviously done by now very famous film composers, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I think that the juxtaposition there of a David Fincher film with all these incredible actors written by Aaron Sorkin, and that it had this like pulsing, badass film score done by the frontman of Nine Inch Nails and his primary collaborator, really blew my mind and kind of made me think, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could score a movie one day. Because obviously I didn't grow up studying classical music. I haven't learned how to conduct yet. So I've never seen myself as like a person capable of what John Williams does. But you know, that was the barrier to entry. And then I would say the first TV show that I was obsessed with has to be The Office. I think The Office was an obsession of mine from a really young age, probably all the way through all of it airing. And I've rewatched it since, and it all holds up. It's a great show. Okay, favorite Office episode. There are quite a few. I know a famous favorite for people is Dinner Party, and that is an iconic episode. I will say though that the start of season 4, it starts with Michael talking about Jan. Jan has been fired from Dunder Mifflin. She's living with him. He has that joke about, Jan made me breakfast this morning. Well, she didn't make, but she bought me the milk for my cereal. It's soy. That's his moment. And then on his way to work, he's talking to camera and he hits Meredith with his car on the way to work. That's like that's probably the strongest season opener of any show I've ever seen. And so funny. So I think I'd probably go season opener, season 4 of The Office. Okay, so I scored Vengeance, which was written and directed by BJ Novak, and BJ directed Scott's Tots, and maybe wrote Scott's Tots too, but I talked to him a lot about that episode, because you can imagine from how hard it is to watch, how gleeful it probably was for them to shoot. What a fun episode to shoot, but it's almost impossible to watch. The first film that brought me to tears was probably not that long ago. I started crying watching movies at an older age. I cried a lot watching a movie called Come On, Come On by Mike Mills. I cried a lot watching Cha-Cha Real Smooth, the Cooper Raiff film. I've cried to quite a few, but those are real standouts. I mean, I guess by that metric, the first film I cried to was Sesame Street 2 or whatever. I was watching at 3 years old and I cried so hard I had to leave the theater. But it wasn't to do with the emotional complexity of the movie. It was because it was too loud. The first line I ever said in a film or TV show was in a movie called Bad Teacher that I was in at 12 years old. Cameron Diaz played, I think, an English teacher or maybe a history teacher, and she had very draconian teaching methods, and we were all stood in a line in the gym, and she was throwing dodgeballs at us if we got the answers to the questions wrong, and she'd asked a question about To Kill a Mockingbird. And I got the answer right. I said, because Atticus is always the voice of reason and justice. And I was spared, and then I was allowed to throw a dodgeball at her and hit her. So strong start to a brief and not spectacular acting career.
Did you actually throw the dodgeball?
I threw it, but not at movie star Cameron Diaz in the face. No, I threw it and a PA caught it. That's what actually happened. The first movie I remember falling in love with was Totoro, the Hayao Miyazaki film, which I love so much and still do love. All just unbelievable. On Billy's new album, we have a song called Chihiro, the namesake of which is from Spirited Away. We're big fans of Studio Ghibli. I've said Ghibli my whole life, but Ghibli could be correct. I haven't asked.
GIF.
Yes, exactly. Both are fine. I know what you mean. You know what I mean. I think the first score that I sort of contextualized and understood that I loved was The Social Network, which I watched when I was 12, because that was how old I was when it came out. But I think without thinking about it, the first score that was deeply important to me was Howard Shore's score for The Fellowship of the Ring, which I watched probably like 4 years old. I watched that really young too. But man, just some of the most beautiful melodies imaginable in those 3 films. Really incredible melodies. The first quote that stuck with me from a movie was probably something from Pirates of the Caribbean 1. I think that movie is rife with dialogue that a 5 or 6 year old is like, I'm gonna run around and quote all this stuff and pick up a stick and try to sword fight my friend. So yeah, I was probably parroting a lot of Captain Barbossa's dialogue from Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. Okay, so the first track that I wrote for Disclaimer was what became the love theme, which you start to hear in chapter 2, but it's between Jonathan, the character played by Louis Partridge, and young Catherine. And I wrote that theme on a piano, actually in New York when I was here a year ago in May, and I wrote this theme and then played it for Alfonso, and we explored it, and then we did so many different versions of it, which was so fun. Not in terms of melody, we felt really good about the melody, but we did Baroque arrangements of it. I did a shoegaze version, actually, that you hear when Jonathan is at the Leaning Tower of Pisa in the first episode. You hear a kind of a shoegaze version of that same melody. And you do hear it in the gondola in episode 1, in the gondola scene in the canals. But that was the first melody that I wrote for Disclaimer. I've had the privilege of knowing Alfonso for years now. I met Alfonso, he brought his daughter, Bu Quaron, to a show in Milan, a tiny show at a club that Billy, my sister, was headlining, and I was playing in her band. And we were backstage and met Bu and then met Alfonso, and turns out he's a real music buff. And I should have known, because when he does have music in his movies, especially songs, they're so incredible. And we started talking about music, and I sent him a playlist of stuff I thought he would like, and he sent me a playlist of stuff he thought I would like. There were some songs that we already both knew, which was really fun. And then fast forward to pandemic, lockdown, I get a call from him, probably summer of 2020, saying, I think I'm gonna create this show with Apple. You know, maybe you should do the music for the show. And I was like full of panic because I had never scored anything, but obviously was like, I have to do that. And so I set about trying to learn everything I could about scoring film and television. And I was given the opportunity to score 2 movies. At the time, I scored a movie called The Fallout, Megan Park directed, and then scored a movie called Vengeance, BJ Novak directed. And then after doing those 2, I kind of was able to start doing Disclaimer, which was an amazing experience.
You were in Fallout 4.
I auditioned for a project that was under wraps. I had to sign an NDA to audition, and they still didn't tell me what it was. And then I did many weeks of voiceover saying stuff that only because I had played the earlier video games, I was like, is this Fallout 4? And they were like, it might be. They wouldn't even tell me what I was doing when I was recording the voiceover for that game. But just again, because I was a fan of the first 3, I was like, I think this is Fallout 4, which was very fun. You know what? I have not watched the entire season, but I think the Fallout show is really great. Big fan of Walton Goggins. I think Walton Goggins is a very deeply charismatic man. I'm very happy for his success.